architectural fabrication is kind of known to be chaotic because you're the last on the scene, you're the last, and you're juggling 15 million different elements in the construction sphere.
It's sort of managing that level of chaos and reducing it to the greatest degree possible is the goal, and turning it into organized chaos, perhaps.
Navigate your leadership journey at the FMA annual meeting, February 27th to the 29th in Clearwater, Florida. At this premier event, you'll connect with top leaders in the fabrication industry to share ideas, collaborate to solve business challenges, and build strategic relationships. Chart your course for success in 2024 and beyond at the FMA annual meeting. Find all the details at fmamfg.org.
Welcome to the Fabricator Podcast. I'm Dan Davis with the Fabricator. This is my co-host for this episode, Tim Heston. Hello, Tim.
Hello, Dan.
You might know him from the Fabricator as well. We're going to be talking with Joe Clark of Architectural Elements today. During the course of the conversation, we were kind of talking about, made a reference to Chicago architecture. We're here at FabTech filming this, and we thought we'd kind of chat about favorite architecture in the city. If you haven't done the architecture tour along the Chicago River, I highly recommend it. I've done it 2 or 3 times, and you learn quite a bit, and it's worth learning about. How about that? We're not going to sit here and do Cheers trivia.
Are we
You wanna
getting
know
paid
this
by
stuff.
like the Chicago Tourism Board?
Yeah. So I'll go ahead. So one of my favorite points of the river tour is the discussion of the merchandise mart.
Sure.
Which at one time was the largest amount of indoor interior space in the U.S. My favorite story from this building was that there are leaders of the Chicago community, I think, retailing giants, whose busts are outside the building. But
Really?
the busts do not face the river. They face away from the river because at the time the river was just a collection of sewage, garbage, and leftovers from the stockyard. So apparently they didn't want to insult all those famous retailers at that time. Do you have go ahead, Tim. What do you like about Chicago?
What do
Mr.
I like
Resident
about
of the
Chicago?
Atlanta area.
Well, what I like at McCormick Place. That's exactly what I like.
McCormick Place.
That is a great answer, Tim. And you like it because FabTech makes it better.
Oh, that's exactly right.
Man.
Well, I learned that part of McCormick Place, original McCormick Place, burned down.
Correct.
I didn't know that until this week.
Yes.
Did you know that, Tim?
I did not know that. No.
That's all the details I have. I don't
That's
know what
all the
year.
details?
Yes.
All I know is it has grown obscenely over the years.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. All
Well,
I'm thankful for is we don't occupy the West Hall. I don't think my feet can handle that.
No, actually, I do like Marina City. Is it called Marina City?
So Marina City,
There's a movie, right? I forget. There's some
Steve
some-
McQueen movie, and I always forget, but it's not obviously bullets on the West Coast. But a car goes out into the Chicago River from Marina City.
Ah, there you go.
So Marina City, I was on Instagram not too recently, and someone actually had a video of an apartment with vintage kitchen equipment from the very first year that Marina City opened.
Yeah.
So it was like a time capsule. It was crazy. It was like not Harvest Gold, but maybe a avocado green like refrigerator or something like that.
All right, there
But
you
to
go.
the point where like, man, it was worth living in that. There we go. Here we go. The Hunter with Steve McQueen.
The parking garage scene where he falls into the river.
Yep.
That's what it was like
Oh,
getting
that's
into McCormick
beautiful.
Place this morning, actually.
Yeah. The importance of architecture is that they need to be highlighted in Hollywood films. We can't put regular buildings in there. We want to showcase the best buildings.
That's right.
Yeah, our generation, we know the Marina City for the Wilco album, Yankee Foxtrot Hotel.
There you go. And only Chicagoans know that because I don't think the love affair with Wilco extends. I mean, they're
I think it
fans,
does.
but man, Chicago loves it some Wilco.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So little known rumor, they wanted to actually do this out of the Willis then Sears Tower.
Oh,
That's
really?
not true. I just made that
Oh,
up.
okay. Oh, that's a Dan fact? Yeah.
There you go.
It's
You
beautiful.
had mentioned, Gareth, that you like Tribune Tower.
Yeah, I do like Tribune. I worked in newspapers.
Yep.
Worked at the Rockford Register Star.
The Gothic style is very
Yeah.
kind of like Batman-like.
Yeah. But now they don't occupy the Tribune Tower anymore.
Correct. I think
Most like
you can actually probably have a dinner party in Colonel McCormick's like big
so.
suite
I
or
don't
whatever
remember
he had up top.
what they're doing it with it now, but I think most original newspaper offices aren't occupying their original buildings.
And the printing press of the Chicago Tribune's about to become a casino. So if
is
there's anything that
that
sums
a
up
Dan fact?
Is that no? That's true.
Okay.
They're, One Freedom Center.
All right.
So if there's anything that sums up America, is that our news industry is being replaced by gambling.
Right. Well,
you
that's
go.
why we're doing this, right?
That's
I
right.
used to write words for a living, and now I'm insulting my family and legacy by doing this.
Yeah. No filter, really.
There you go. Well, thanks for joining, Tim. I hope I didn't bring you down to my level.
It's all right.
Tim has people to go talk to.
Yes.
That's us.
That's
There's a
right.
much more intelligent conversation coming up with Joe Clark.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
I didn't mess
Fan-
that one up.
fantastic videos he produces, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
it is actually an interesting conversation.
Yes. You're insinuating this wasn't. Anyway, enjoy.
This episode of the Fabricator Podcast is brought to you by Fabricators and Manufacturers Association. A membership with FMA gives you access to essential training programs, invaluable networking opportunities, and company-focused resources that provide a competitive advantage in the metal fabrication industry. Become a member today by visiting fmamfg.org. And now, back to the episode.
Welcome back. Dan Davis with you from The Fabricator. I've got Tim Heston here, also The Fabricator, and our guest today, Joe Clark, Architectural Elements. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Can you give us an idea of how Architectural Elements came to be and maybe some background about yourself?
Yeah, when I first started Architectural Elements, it was actually 4 years previous to its current iteration, and its current iteration has been in business about 15 years.
Okay.
But 4 years prior to that, I had a little business called Artistic Elements, where I started off doing sort of more artistic features and things of that nature. You know, I very much like the idea of being a professional artist. However, the sort of practical side of me made me sort of zero in on something that was a little more, I guess, accessible, which was building things for architectural projects, high-end residences, landscape features, and things of that nature. As I said, there was a previous iteration of that business. I kind of started at a bad point in my personal life in terms of, you know, family and things of that nature. For example, you know, my wife was not employed at that time, you know, so I was like the sole breadwinner. And trying to cover insurance and everything like that, you know, it just didn't work out.
Right.
And I shut it down after just a year, but knew it was a good idea, learned a number of things, and went back to work for 4 years, learned some more relevant stuff to what I was doing or wanted to do, and then started up again. And again, started up in the two-car garage and working the nights and weekends thing like you might expect. And then launched out again and did so much more successfully the second time around. That kind of brings us to where we're at now to some degree after 15 years of hard work and perseverance, etc. But
That's awesome.
yeah.
So did you have a desire to kind of get involved in fabricating? How did you find that?
You know, I discovered that I was interested in fabrication just sort of by happenstance. At one point in time, back when I was in my, I don't know, mid to late 20s, I just came across a job, you know. I was actually inquiring with a friend of mine's brother who had a chem dry carpet business because I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point in time. I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll clean carpets, you know. And he advised me that I didn't want to clean carpets, you know, which was good of him. And further advised me to go meet his business park neighbor who was an electrical sign builder. So I went down there and I interviewed with him, and wasn't exactly a difficult interview process there. I think, you know, he could tell that I had a heartbeat and was somewhat intelligent. So I think that was good enough, right?
Yeah.
But so they hired me, and I was apprenticed underneath a guy who had a lot of experience in the sign business, you know, doing light fabrication, sheet metal, plastics, electrical. It's a really diverse industry, and
Right.
it's very interesting to me still. You know, I like signage. It's a great category. But I sort of got introduced to fabrication in that industry and kind of went on with it from there.
Now, obviously, we all know you from your amazing video work for the past few years. So, kind of bring us through how you got into that, and as far as the importance
Sure.
of building that audience.
I think like a lot of people my age and with my interests, I was watching those reality TV shows back then and sort of seeing, what people like Jesse James and others were doing with video content. Obviously, they had their TV shows, but just sort of illustrated what it could do for a simple tradesman, so to speak. If you look at somebody like Jesse James, who was a talented individual in his industry, but as soon as he had, the exposure to what it is that he was doing, that sort of blew it up, right? So my concept was to basically take that and adapt it to whatever practical way I could for my own business, and basically show people what it is that we do and try to do it in an interesting way for the purposes of doing more of it, I guess. So, video production on metal fabrication projects is pretty inherently interesting. So, and the products that we make at Architectural Elements are really interesting as well, because they tend to be art and architecture, and they're not, simple, boring bracketry or things of that nature. So basically just telling the story of how we make these things is pretty engaging in and of itself.
Yeah, so there's definitely a commitment to quality for these things. So it's not like a GoPro on somebody's head and like, here's a beat I've just laid. I mean, there's like really high end video production. There's music very well placed, and
Sure,
it's kind of a I don't want to call it a music video quality, but it definitely brings you into the project and doesn't bore you. Was that the intent from the beginning?
Yeah, as it relates to, quality, that's something that, sort of permeates throughout our company, right? So pretty much everything we do is going to have a high measure of quality. And, my approach to quality, I think, is just sort of inherent in myself, is like, why would I do anything less than the absolute best I can do it,
Right.
And you got to keep that in check in a lot of cases. You can get so caught up in quality that you're putting way too much time into something and losing a lot of money on it, especially in the custom fabrication space, But as it relates to the quality of the videography and what have you, it's definitely got better over time. And I've had the luxury of working with some pretty talented individuals.
You mentioned about, storytelling in your video. So kind of bring me through that process of, all right, we're not just going to show arcs and sparks, but there's a beginning, obviously it's not a traditional story in a sense, but it's a visual story you're trying to tell to actually keep people watching. So kind of bring me through your process as far as, all right, you get the raw material, then what then?
I guess the storytelling aspect of it kind of goes back to what the intent is or what the story is that you're trying to tell. And, as it relates to the overarching storytelling, we are telling a story of crafts and craftsmanship and quality and also the story of delivering on the designer's intent. We basically build the products they're designed by architects and designers. So if we're not nailing their design intent to the greatest degree, then we're not doing our job. But as it relates to the quality of videography, definitely we want to have quality videography because we build quality products. And as it relates to the storytelling aspect of it, again, it's more of a story of craft and craftsmanship and just overall attention to detail.
Do you convey that the interplay between the designers and architects and what you have to deal with it, to kind of describe that process, that creativity that comes on the front end to make fabrication on the back end the best it can be?
Yeah, that's kind of goes to our design development that we do with architects and contractors and such. It's one of our strengths is figuring out how to build things. The things that we build have never been done before. Sure, there's been staircases made before, but in terms of somebody's doing something new with it, they all want to have this staircase or the art piece or the massive pivot doors be sort of unique in some capacity. So they're typically introducing something that they believe to be unique. And to that end, we're basically in a position to figure out how to do it.
Right.
And that's the fun, challenging part and stuff we seek out, quite frankly.
Right. Yeah, it is.
So one of the videos that really caught the attention attention of us in the office was the one where you made the safe door.
Yeah, yeah.
And that, I mean, it's almost like modern techniques to create something that's kind of retro in a way.
Yeah.
I'm sure bank doors are still made, but it definitely looked like something that might have been around for 100 years, but yet was only made recently. Can you
Yeah.
kind of touch upon that project?
Yeah, that project, we actually, and as in many projects that we do videography on, not all of them, we do a lot of project-based videos that are actual architectural elements, regular line of work.
Yeah.
But that particular one was one that I sort of created start to finish.
Right.
I had a friend who had he owned a cannery building in Kirkland that he'd modified into sort of a mixed-use space for events and things of that nature. Plus, he has a foundation there, so he's very interested in the trades and things of that nature. But anyway, I just proposed to him that we do something cool for his facility, and then he suggested that we should build a door down to this basement space down below. So we came up with a concept. I worked with a guy who's a very talented engineer, Patrick Dite, and I've worked with him. He's been an employee of Architectural Elements and of the machine shop, and so anyway, just working with him is a pretty natural fit.
That's
and,
awesome.
He's a talented individual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you say that's not probably a typical project, but does it represent kind of everything you like in a project?
It's typical in some regards. We've made similar vault doors for private residences and things of that nature.
Okay.
A lot of the stuff that we do is like sort of NDA protected, so we don't actually produce media on it typically. But in that project, yes, we do doors. We actually do some crazy, cool, massive doors for high-end residences that are 7 feet wide, 16 feet tall, pivoting, stuff like that. But yeah, doors are part of what we do.
Well, it's interesting seeing the folks in this video that they're so engaged. They're so like, all right, here we go. We're going to do this and that, and there's a logical step, logical engagement. So kind of bring us through, like, we had talked earlier about the business acumen of metal fabrication and the engagement of metal fabrication. So kind of is there a link between storytelling and video, standard processes on the floor, and professionalism on the floor? Kind of bring us through that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a link between processes and professionalism. In terms of what that is, I haven't really put a whole lot of thought into it in terms of that direct link there. I can speak to them individually for sure. As it relates to our video production, each of those projects on there is very carefully thought out, and we're executing those shoots in 2 days. And as much as the projects tend to be fairly small, they are detailed and fairly labor intense. So there's a lot of prep that goes into it, CAD drafting, parts cutting, and all that sort of stuff, which basically amounts to project management of the project. So production of a video doesn't mean just showing up and shooting fabrication on that day. You have to have everything in line. Just basically a well planned out project, and then work with a talented videographer to do that work is very important as well. But having a good fabrication plan, having all the materials lined up, having everything you need there is takes a lot of planning.
Yeah.
So
well, and I've noticed, a lot of videos we walk this shop, this FabTech show floor, and you see all the videos of the technology, etc. There's a lot of archy flashy stuff. But I have to be honest, there are not that many people in the videos.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not, and it's appropriate because it's a technology show, and so you're selling technology. But a lot of times, what I see in marketing material of fab shops and various other areas is that you want to show the engagement of the people. You want to show, all right, you're not just employing button pushers. You're employing personnel that actually can plan, be progressive, and actually move your company forward and care about the quality that you're producing versus somebody who just clocks in and clocks out. And I don't know, that's kind of the engagement I saw in your videos, where it just cuts and says, all right, here, we're producing this on time, on schedule, on budget, that kind of thing. So it's kind of I thought just kind of an interesting link.
How many projects might you have on the shop floor at one time?
it varies in terms of on the shop floor versus in process overall. That's also a different discussion. But on the shop floor, we could have, as many as, 10 in various phases of construction. Some towards the end, some towards the beginning, some in the thick of it. But in process, meaning like we've been awarded the project to final completion, that could be, as many as 30 projects going simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Some you're just something as simple as just trying to get the retainage out of the GC, you know.
Right. Right.
But then the rest on the other side would be early planning stages, talking to architects, doing drafting kickoff meetings and things of that nature. So
How many people do you have working for you?
we have about 35 people between two companies.
Wow.
There's actually two companies. Architectural Elements is the main company, and then we have an ironworkers installation company.
Oh, okay.
It's called a 10K.
Has that been around for as long?
No, it's fairly new. It's
Okay.
been about 4 years on that. We operate out of the local 86 Ironworkers Union there,
Okay.
and very great team there, just talented guys. And we put that business together because of sort of a need, our own need,
Right.
you know, to when you're working on a union job site, you need to have highly skilled installers to install the products that we do. You know, we had some bad experiences previously, you know, hiring out of the union hall and getting some guys here that haven't had any experience with the high level of finish that we execute. And it's no offense to those individuals, they just haven't been exposed to it, you know?
Right.
So we have our own team that can bring that level of care and detail that's necessary to execute our installations.
It's really kind of extending that quality commitment.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And in doing so, you know, I think we're helping the Ironworkers Union in terms of like the things that we offer and the approach that we offer. And we're proud of our team and the work that we execute within that rough and tumble bunch, you know.
Right. Do you have
Yeah.
anything like interns, apprenticeships, or?
You know, the Ironworkers Union very much does.
And so they'll feed both sides of the business?
Well, whether or not they actually have an intern program or not, I don't know if I can
Well,
speak
yeah,
to
but
that
they all,
specifically,
most
but
of those unions have apprenticeships. And
yeah. Some better than others, you know.
Right.
In terms of education and process, but Architectural Elements, we basically just train our people internally.
Gotcha.
We sort of assess a level that they're at, you know, ranging from L1 to L4, in terms of what we believe their level of skill, so to speak, is. And that goes to sort of pay scale and basically training and things of that nature.
Yeah. I had a question about, you know, because you got into the business, you know, kind of in an interesting fashion and learned it kind of in a bootstrapping way. Now, how does that affect how you pass on the knowledge to the folks you're trying to hire and grow your business?
Yeah, you know, we definitely want to pass on the knowledge. And more than that, we want to be a proactive part of creating an education program for ourselves, but also for the industry. I like the idea of trying to give back to the industry in terms of providing, I don't know, written or even video, more specifically video actually, documentation of processes and techniques. There's a million YouTube videos out there, but I'd love to put together sort of a collection that's our approach that shows people how to do what we do in a very specific sense. You know, sort of like just, you know, even how to hold your abrasives correctly for the desired effect, you know, just really nut and bolt level type information, in just concise, excellent videography, kind of very well presented format. That's something I want to start pretty soon here.
Yeah, you know, that's a great idea because, you know, there's just so much. There's, you know, every conference I go to, there's always talk about skilled labor. You can't find skilled labor, but then if you actually try to find where to learn how to do the thing,
Right.
there's just surprisingly little online besides various, that shows the intricacies. I mean, you have general tips, but if you get down to the intricacies of actually how that abrasive, let's say a wire brush or whatever, and we saw that those close-ups that you have, you could cut those together into various aspects, saying this is the result, this is why, and this was the cost behind it. Because my gosh, you took forever to do what why? Because you were eating away at this consumable, and you probably could talk about your mistakes over the years too. For that, as far as all right, how you've learned over the years, right?
Oh yeah,
Never
yeah.
let them know your weakness.
Yeah, or not, never let down.
Yeah. I don't know if we have enough time to get into the mistakes side of things, but
But But yeah, I mean, you could technically. I mean, you could go through the past projects. What do you have that in mind for the future? How do you expect to put together those videos that you have in your head right now?
Yeah, I still like the idea of doing sort of overall project videos where you tell the story arc of a project, but they're actually fairly difficult to execute, and you need to have in my opinion, to have an in-house videography team to do it, because it's when you have a story arc of like 6 months or a year sometimes from inception to installation.
Right.
It's hard to tell that story utilizing outsourced videography, etc. But anyway, in terms of doing sort of technique specific videography, I just like the approach of just having excellent cinematography, just the right camera angles, close-ups. And the idea is to create this content and make it generally interesting to anyone.
Right.
And I think that if you shoot things correctly, you can kind of curate that general interest. Granted, what we do with, sparks and metal and whatever sort of creates that extra level of interest right from the onset. But I think that it can be done. There's always a camera angle or something that can be done to actually get it just right or make it even more interesting. So I like to try to figure out what that is.
Yeah.
And but beyond that, just having a clear explanation of the processes and why you're doing things, I think is an important part of the aspect as well.
Yeah.
Right.
I think your resume is a great example for other people in fabricating, maybe even younger, those entering the industry, of like what they can get that they may not realize is available in terms of like, I think one of the things, we see as an industry is that, we build up the excitement, build up the opportunity, and then somebody runs into a job and it's only like $18 an hour.
Yeah.
And, you can't, raise a family on that. And you can debate what it should be, or maybe what wage level should be. But the point is, there is an opportunity to at least gain experience. And no one says you have to stay at a particular place forever. And can you explain to us how you got kind of your first fabricating experience, and then maybe something clicked in your head and you had a plan at a younger age?
Yeah, I was trying to decide when I actually had a plan, or if I just got dissatisfied and wanted to go try different things.
There's no bigger motivator than poor leadership in a company. So
there you go. Yeah, so as it relates to the trades work, it's a certain point I did have a consciousness of like, hey, I want to try some different things to sort of broaden my skills and what have you. But early on, it was just sort of getting bored and wanting to try something else. One mindset that I've always had is the idea that it's okay to make less money, right? So I think people will kind of get stuck in the same thing because they want to earn the same amount of money that the people that are advanced in that specific niche make, and they can't change trades because they'll have to take a pay cut.
Right.
Like, for example, when I went from being a metal fabricator to a carpenter, carpenters make pretty good money, in a lot of cases more money than metal fabricators, but for my skill level, or experience level I should say, they weren't able to give me journeyman carpenter wages, although I was immediately working alongside the journeyman, doing high-end finished carpentry. So anyway, the idea of just freeing yourself up to make a little less money, and having the confidence to know that if you're good enough, you're going to be able to earn more money within that trade. But also it's an investment in yourself, right? So take a couple of bucks less an hour to actually broaden your mental toolbox.
Yeah.
And the more you have in the mental toolbox, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah. One stopover in your career, it was like for a metal boat manufacturer. And you mentioned prototyping. To me, kind of jumped out at me as pretty interesting. Is that an example of you kind of doing what you needed to do there and then kind of sought for something else?
Yeah, I was actually at that point in time, I was working for a sign shop, and I just moved to Bellingham and kind of took a job or two to get a job, and I drove by this industrial park where we are now located, and I saw this really cool looking aluminum boat. It was all faceted, just sitting in raw aluminum form, like behind a chain link fence back in this the yard of this fabrication facility. It's like, man, I got to figure out who's making those boats. Those are really cool, you know? So, you know, when I was sitting there at this sign shop and we didn't have anything to do that day, I'd already cleaned the shop and modified the shop in every way I could, you know? It's just like, all right, it's like, well, I guess there's time for something else. So I opened up the phone book, figured out who that company was, and called them up and got an interview. And I went to work for them, and it was a really interesting product. The company subsequently went out of business, but as is the nature of boat builders, feels like. But it was a cool product. It was like a aluminum flotation collar, and it's kind of like a Zodiac or whatever.
Yeah,
but they would have
aluminum, huh?
Yeah,
Wow.
aluminum flotation collar on it. It's called aluminum chambered boats.
Okay.
It's modeled after the Staby Craft boats from New Zealand.
Wow.
But anyway, it was a fun project. Fun product to build.
Yeah.
And I got involved in the research and development side of that, doing prototypes on parts and what have you, and documenting parts and I'd had some draftsman experience, so I spent a lot of time just hand drafting the entire library of parts for this thing.
Wow.
Creating like basically sort of fabrication manuals, if you want to call it that, for the individual boat models that they did. And in many cases, hand drew what the parts should look like,
Right.
bend angles and all that sort of stuff, just on 8.5 by 11 on a clipboard, you know. But I also did some table drafting for them in terms of sales models and things of that nature. So they used me sort of a Swiss Army knife there.
That's awesome.
It's fun stuff.
So do you take a lot of personal, I shouldn't say personal, do you take a lot of positives from these past experiences to influence your current kind of business approach, managerial style? Or is it a lot of like, yeah, I'm not doing that? You know, is it kind of a negative as well?
Yeah, you know, I think negatives can sort of reinforce things even more than the positives sometimes. But yeah, I definitely learned about some leadership styles, and I worked for some individuals that I wouldn't want to emulate personally, but I've also worked with some other people that did have great traits that are worth emulation, you know. But yeah, I don't know how much I was influenced by other people in terms of leadership style. I don't know if I even have a leadership style per se, but
but does that kind of make sense for the business you're in, where you know it's less about hierarchical structure and working on long-term projects, high volume, and more like specialty groups? And I don't want to say everybody's kind of equal, but there's definitely everybody's in it.
Yeah, well, I definitely take a collaborative approach as it relates to pretty much everything I do. I try to. And for me, you know, people that don't collaborate well I have issues with them, and I don't want to work with them, quite frankly.
Right.
And be them.
Have you had to take those steps?
Take the steps
and maybe just, you know, part ways, whether it be like a supplier or maybe not even internally.
Yeah, you know, if I'm working with somebody who's, you know, maybe they're an employee, maybe they're a general contractor, maybe they're a designer or whatever, and they just don't work well with others, then that sort of, you know, kind of runs against the grain of what we're trying to do. We're just trying to create a collaborative team that works well together, that has a lot of respect for each other. Yeah. And so the collaborative process means everything to me.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know, especially for your line of work, architectural elements in a building project, you're the last one to know, right? Is that usually the case where, you know, you're just, okay, it's now go, you know, that's basically your business. So kind of describe the role of collaboration early on, as much early as you can, but then also the adjustments you have to make last minute to make these projects happen. That kind of scale to not only your business, but fabrication overall, really. So,
Yeah, it's super important for us to get involved early on projects. And in some cases, you know, you even have to go back further than our start point, right? Because you have to sort of challenge the assumptions that have been made to get us to that point, right?
Right.
Some people may have some assumptions based on their lack of understanding of what it is that we're doing or going to do, or they've already sort of applied an approach to it, like they think it should go down this way. And it's like, well, if we did this and we sequence this differently, it's going to allow all the other trays to move forward. We can run things simultaneously.
Right.
So the first thing I'd like to do is look at the base assumptions relative to a project and evaluate whether or not those are correct. And then from there, just evaluate our game plan moving forward in consideration of everything. And there's 1,000 details relative to what we do, and multiple trades that are affected by what we do. We have to take everybody into consideration.
Right.
So, just trying to work a collaborative process all the way through, staying in contact with the general contractors, keeping them engaged is a challenge. The more they're engaged, the better off the project's going to go. And the more everyone is engaged and understands the project on a high level, the more successful it's going to be. So the challenge is there for sure.
Do you have a story to share where you could maybe talk in broad terms, but where the engagement wasn't there, and all of a sudden you had to shift. So as a company, you had to bend over backwards to get this project in, make some last minute changes, and you couldn't get that without internal collaboration. But boy, it would have been better with a bit more external collaboration.
Yeah, there's lots of examples of those. There's lots of people that could be thrown under buses. In terms of ourselves included. But yeah, there's been lots of projects over the years where I guess learning what we can do differently, we should have stepped up and sort of managed up a bit. And we're getting better at recognizing that. You could tell when a team is not necessarily engaged, or contracting team, et cetera, and just recognizing that, hey, we need to play up a little bit here. We need to go over the halfway line and carry this project more so than we might normally, because of the engagement level or the understanding level of the people that we're working with might be less than you would hope.
Yeah. Do you engage with BIM or any other kind of software to actually plan ahead and make sure that everything fits as it should and sequence right with mechanical and everything else?
We do. We model everything that we make in SolidWorks, which is not necessarily great for BIM integration. However, the things that we draft within SolidWorks can be imported into the BIM model.
Right.
So, for us, we're not looking at the BIM model for interference necessarily, but going to the sites and doing digital surveys frequently throughout the process. As I mentioned, a lot of the products that we produce have a really long, basically long lifespan. And during that lifespan, in the construction of a commercial building or a high-end residence, things change.
Right.
And they change on the fly a lot of times. They weren't anticipating running an AC unit or duct line through your airspace, but you show up at the site and it's like, okay, great, now what? We got to move this.
That's funny.
Our staircase goes right there, But staying on the, getting early takeoffs on the actual as-built conditions, and frequently visiting the job sites to verify the conditions and to kind of, for accountability's sake, making sure that general contractors and other trades are doing what they need to do to make our installation go the way it's supposed to. That's a large part of what we do.
Yeah. Gareth called up one of your projects and involved a sphere you made for a studio in Bellingham.
Acid ball.
Oh yeah, we were actually, that was a public arts commission that was awarded to Mudis Studios, which is an architecture firm. And we were involved in that project in as much as we welded on the structural bracing of it.
Oh, okay.
But it was just, we took it on as sort of videography project to sort of storytell it overall. But it was a very interesting project. That thing weighed about 210 tons, as it turns out, and Oxbow Mega, I think they moved that thing.
Well, we like big art here at the Fabricator
Podcast.
Well, we were talking earlier. You were talking about embracing the challenge of creating like staircases. Is there one staircase project that stands out that was particularly difficult?
Yeah, I guess probably the more difficult ones are the ones that we did early on, and we're sort of cutting our teeth and trying to learn how to do staircases, and we were a high-end residential fabrication company, so we pretty much had to teach ourselves these things,
Right.
But Yeah, lots of challenging ones. They're all really heavy. They're in confined spaces, and in many cases, these staircases have to go up the elevator. And seems kind of ironic, but they have to be in small enough pieces they can actually roll through the door. And even interesting challenges of that. You roll 2,000 pounds into an elevator, and you're going to stretch that cable, 3 inches, and now you've got a 3-inch step you got to deal with on the next floor trying to get out of it. So there's no shortage of challenges as it relates to that type of project.
Have you done any cantilevered stairs?
Yeah, we've done that a couple times.
Please don't put them in a house I'm going into.
They've got challenges.
I was talking to another fabricator, and he goes, I don't know who they're trying to harm, but we put them in.
Yeah, they're definitely challenging. A lot of times you're having to, fasten these things directly to the framing, and it's very, very reinforced framing, preferably. Concrete walls, and then it gets oftentimes sheetrock around it and what have you. So it's a fairly complicated project.
Do you still get challenged on some assignments? Like, wow, all right, let's sit back and think about this.
Yeah, to a certain degree, every project has its challenges because we never do the same thing twice. But yeah, we have an interesting challenge on deck. We have a staircase for, I think it's Northeastern University in Seattle there. And it's a spiral staircase. And they want to have cascade coil mesh on there, which is basically sort of fireplace screen mesh as a guardrail infill.
Wow.
And it's it's a helical shape, and there's all kinds of challenges as it relates to trying to tension this material such that it's structural enough for a guardrail. So that's one that we're currently working on as a design development budget initially, and then and we'll likely win the contract to build it.
Yeah.
But people often look to us to sort of figure out how to do things, and that's something that we're definitely looking to expand upon and to sell into that space is sort of
Are architects
demystifying.
and clients open to your suggestions for maybe ease of manufacturing or perhaps reducing costs because of materials? Any type of advice like that?
Yeah, they tend to be pretty open. For one thing, what they've drawn oftentimes isn't in line with budget reality.
Okay.
So, but our approach is to try to deliver what they want in a practical sense, and sort of design engineer things.
Yeah.
It's like, I think we can preserve the look of this thing, but if we approach it somewhat differently, be a lot more successful. And oftentimes engineers will draw things in a way they're not even full consideration of the logistics of the site, for example.
Yeah.
In one case recently, we have to take staircase up the elevator again, and the way they drew this thing, which just was not in consideration of that whatsoever. So we give them the price as drawn, because it has to be an apples to apples comparison of bids, And then we tell them how they can improve upon that, and that's clear and present with that specific project even. So
there's so many cowboy operations that I've visited that they're really exciting to see, but also there's this element of chaos because you can tell that there are, and you can tell how they got there because they're a good shop. They have great machinery, great technology, great people, in fact. But boy, the process is just the process. They outgrew their processes. In other words, the processes didn't account for all the variability, and especially with material availability, delivery availability, all this kind of stuff. And so when I visit, sometimes we have to work this weekend because. And so we talked about skilled labor in this industry. It's sometimes I work 30 hours a week. Sometimes I work 60 hours a week. That's not a fun career kind of thing. So how do you avoid chaos on the floor? Even in this chaotic kind of architectural fabrication is kind of known to be chaotic because you're the last on the scene, you're the last, and you're juggling 15 million different elements in the construction sphere. So kind of bring us through that.
I think there's always going to be a level of chaos, so to speak, because it is different every time, and you can't necessarily blanket apply processes and techniques to every project. So it's sort of managing that level of chaos and reducing it to the greatest degree possible is the goal. And turning it into organized chaos, perhaps. But yeah, it's the best in my opinion, the best way to do that is to have everyone educated on what the goal is of the project and on the same page for execution. And the best way to do that is just to talk frequently and in depth. And as it relates to, that idea, I think there's an idea is like, well, we got to get this into production, so let's rush it onto the floor and just get started, right? And that produces these false starts. It's like, oh, you go down this certain path, and you're like, okay, well, I guess we need to back up and go down a different path, But if you sit down, you work it out and have a fabrication plan and have considered the variety of steps and pitfalls of the individual steps as a whole, then you can have a more sort of thoughtful plan versus just running out there and getting started, So there's lots of work to do there, but.
And I see, just to follow up on that, a huge thing today. In fact, we got a call from there's a guy at a large OEM, I won't mention the name, but the guy called me and said, all right, I'm head of the welding department and I've been put in charge of laser cutting.
Right.
And all our laser cutters are gone. And, all the operators are gone. All right, what do we, they were looking for resources, so we helped them as far as providing that information. But there's that whole hierarchical structure in the organization where the knowledge was gone. Yeah. And if you have that, that baseline knowledge of, all right, what makes a good weld, what makes a good grind, what makes a good bend, and what is air bending versus bottom bending, all these specific things that fabricators should know on the floor. And if that vacates, then you're in trouble. And so that's where documentation comes into play. That's where communication comes into play. Watch this video, see how you can do it, bring other people up. But ideally, you should never be in that situation. You should have a culture of cohesiveness so that you don't have mass exodus.
Yeah.
But that's always a risk in a chaotic environment. So and there's always that level of chaos that's inherent, especially in architectural fab. So so yeah.
Yeah, process documentation is pretty important there. And again, it's pretty within a custom fabrication setting, it's difficult to document a precise process, but there is definitely sort of general rules of thumb. And that's, what our interest is in developing for ourselves is like, well, here's sort of general rules of thumb, best practices, I guess you'd call it,
Right.
If you're going to start a project, there's some pretty rudimentary things you should do. First of all, you should sit with those blueprints for a couple of hours, depending on the complexity. You should know everything there is to know about it, You should understand what the lines on the drawings mean, Why is that hidden line there? Or what's this fastener call out, I wonder when I actually order those fasteners. There's just a tremendous amount of information that can be gleaned just by focusing, taking a minute, sitting down in a quiet space, focusing on what it is that you're going to do, and then write down questions, and then talk to the various stakeholders on the project to get an even better understanding of what it is you want to do. Then from there, you can develop a plan.
Yeah.
The plan is going to be a rough guideline, admittedly, because again, in a custom fabrication setting, you have to be able to have some latitude within the plan there for all the things you didn't realize were going to happen,
Yeah.
So it's it's definitely takes a fair amount of effort there and lots of disciplines as well,
And your operation too, most fabricators take it through various processes, right? So if you have a welder, that welder may be bringing it through, obviously through grinding, so he's not going to overweld.
Yeah.
And he's going to be doing some polishing and finishing and bringing it through. Are most people on your team multi-talented, multi-process folks that bring it through multiple steps?
In terms of the skill levels on the floor, you mean, or what's the question?
In other words, can you carry a project from beginning to end? If you're intimately involved with beginning to end, then you are not so worried about how fast you can lay down this weld. You're worried about how fast you can get it out the door. And so so you think holistically.
It's our goal to keep a single leader on a project lead on all the way through its life there, and then we still have room to improve on that in terms of getting those project leads involved early and making sure they're fully engaged, and getting shop fabrication guys off the shop floor and into production meetings relative to the project is also an ongoing challenge as well.
Yeah.
Just trying to find time, and trying to assert the importance of it such that they'll take the time to do it,
Yeah.
So-
yeah. And the challenge I think the industry has is trying to find the sexiness of process planning. That's what we need. Because
Yeah.
well, no,
The
I mean,
world's worst
I-
rap single.
no, because you have videos of these wonderful projects and they're artistic, but then you get people to actually work in the industry, and then if they don't know how to collaborate, communicate, and plan, they realize, hey, this is not. I mean, this is artistic, but it's also a business, and you have to get it through.
Yeah.
You cannot, you cannot
Yeah.
just because I love to create. Okay, that's great. You love to create, but you also have to plan.
Yeah, that's I can remember being a fabricator working for other people and having sort of these high moral standards like, well, I'm not going to fabricate to that level because I'm better than that, and then having had my own business, I really sort of learned why you fabricate to the level it's been sold, right?
Right.
And had when I went back to work for other people, I had a new appreciation for what it means to be a business owner and to get projects done on budget. Understanding the level of something was sold, so to speak, and the quality level, if you want to call it that, is really critical because you have to be able to adjust and not only adjust for the practical side of things. Like, for example, if something's getting buried in concrete, and you don't need to get the DA sander out and polish the surfaces or whatever, it's kind of an over exaggeration, but there's different levels of finish, and you have to have those things in consideration from the onset, and make sure that you're actually what you're doing fabrication wise is in line with what was sold and the overall goal. So
Yeah. And it's kind of like, the old story where, I visited a fab shop where the guy was told me a story, and the shop owner told me a story about how some brake operators love to actually get together around the brake and really figure out how to bend this flange that was very difficult because it's a very short flange. They had to finagle the tooling and finagle the bend sequence and all this kind of stuff. And then the manager came back and said, okay, but why are we even tackling it? Have we communicated with the customer about this? And let's back up. Did we really need this?
Right.
What's the process behind it? What's the intent behind all this? And so they gave a shift, and they said, all right, we're going to do more customer communication. Processes became simpler on the floor. What's odd is, there was some pushback on the floor because that was their favorite part of the day, is that challenge to get it through.
Sure.
But it was like, yeah, but this is a business too. We got to get it out. We don't get paid to futz in front of the machine. We get paid to produce, right? So
and there's always another challenge.
So with you here at FabTech, you looking for anything and maybe catching your eye, not necessarily to buy now, but maybe down the road?
Oh, I'd love to have a tube laser at some point in time. I don't know if I'll ever get to that level of production. You have to be in a high production capacity, but it's just such a crazy versatile tool for light fabrication. Getting an actual laser cutting table would be great.
Okay.
We've been utilizing a plasma table for quite some time, but we've been outsourcing laser cutting for years and years, and water cutting. But having an in-house laser table would be a nice accomplishment. And always just interested in tools in general.
Yeah.
I personally pretty much have the ultimate tool collection between a couple of businesses and
Right.
2 facilities and my own personal stuff. So I'm always interested in adding to that, whether it be some sort of new driver bit or
Right.
piece of CNC equipment. So
Yeah.
I love tools.
Yeah. Where would you like to see architectural elements in the future, or maybe even yourself?
Architectural elements in the future, I would like for it to be positioned as sort of a go-to for difficult to execute architectural and artistic projects. And I like the idea of developing our design side of things, and actually selling product development as a service, which we do currently. It tends to be if we're doing the development on it, and we do it as a separate contract often, but if we're doing the development on it, we almost always do the fabrication. But there's projects that need our assistance and expertise that are across the country. It would be better suited to have a local fabricator do What we want to do is be involved in those projects to make sure that they're actually being done to match the design intent and in consideration of the whole project. So your typical job shot's not going to have the same experience that we have working with architects and through submittal processes and things of that nature, and not necessarily even have the capacity to have full consideration of a full project arc, from early drawings and designs to how to work with other trades, understanding waterproofing. And there's just a myriad of different things that we have learned along the way that we're trying to take and basically package and sell, if you will, as a service to general contractors, to architecture firms, and even other fabrication shops potentially that have not had exposure to the type of things that we do.
We've had a mutual friend of yours, Nate Bowman, on the podcast before, and you're both from Seattle area.
Yeah.
Is there something about and you've both spoken about the changing the aesthetic of kind of metal fabrication industry a little bit. He has, I don't know if you guys knew this, but if you Google welding and you bring up the welding Wikipedia page, Nate Bowman somehow changed one of his photos as the main photo on the welding Wikipedia page. Anyway, so is there something about the Pacific Northwest that kind of lends to that, kind of changing that aesthetic of the metal fabrication, metalworking industry?
So architecture in the Pacific Northwest tends to be fairly metal intense, I guess you'd call it. And not in all cases, but there's a lot of sort of contemporary homes being built. And there's, architects such as Tom Kundig, who are basically the metal architects. Every home they build has some cool metal aspects to it. And Tom Kundig in particular, he likes to put gizmos in his homes. That's a piece of architecture that does something typically kinetic. Could be lots of cases doors, could be, who knows, a roof that lifts off a building or whatever the case might be. So there's definitely a lot of influence in the custom architectural metal space in the architectural realm there. And working with Nate is interesting because he has some similar frustrations to myself in terms of the idea of changing mindsets, of people, and particularly with Nate there, he has a interesting challenge in front of him because welders they're not particularly open-minded about their processes and what have you. So getting people to change the way they do things,
Right.
actually based on science, is sort of his ongoing challenge.
I will say Seattle is you from an area where Boeing has such a presence. I mean, there's obviously been a history of machinists, people who work their hands in that area. And the other thing that jumps out with me when Gareth asked that question is that the public park that used to be an industrial area, but they kept elements of the park there from the I don't know whether it was a gasworks plant.
Yeah, Gasworks Park. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's recognized by people that do outdoor planning as one of the best reuse of former industrial land. So in a way, I mean, is a permanent reminder of what was. And I'm not sure other towns kind of or areas had that appreciation, even out east, because I mean, everything started there before westward migration and colonists kind of coming in and industrializing the rest of the U.S. It's kind of neat having that there as part of the permanent landscape.
Yeah, that's I think it's becoming more and more common is to use industrial relics as sort of art installations. Even that acid ball project there in Bellingham is a great example of that.
Right.
And the next one in Bellingham is they have 5 of these sort of missile-looking tanks that are lined up. They're trying to figure out how they're going to present those as art pieces there.
Wow.
But it's I like that personally. Coming to places like Chicago and seeing all this metal fabrication and all these sort of living relics, like the subway system. It's just interesting to stare at this elevator bridge structure and just sort of contemplate how it was made.
Yeah, one of the best tourist things to do is the architecture tour here in Chicago on the river. And I get both of you are more intelligent than I am, but the architect that actually kind of introduced steel as a part of the building instead of being hidden.
Yeah,
That type of approach. It's as you use the term living relics. It's living examples of what can be, and it's not done for like artistry. It's broad, it's big, it's bold, and it's
they call it AESS. It's architecturally expressed structural steel. In the industry there. But yeah, it's Chicago's really interesting in that regards. You could be a full-time brass repair guy here, and just working on brass doors or whatever else. It's just actually pretty striking to walk around and see all the metal integration and how extensively metal is used in construction here, from particularly as it relates to like the subway systems and things of that nature. But the building facades and all that sort of stuff's really cool. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today. And Joe, thank you. Tim, thank you.
All right.
If you have any questions, comments, or advice, I don't know,
Criticism.
Yeah,
You can do it yourself.
send it to Gareth at fmamfg.org or the podcast at fmamfg.org.
Yeah. Oh, Joe, where can we find you on social media, website?
Yeah, you can see our social media page for Architectural Elements at architectural_elements, and on Instagram there. And our website is arch-ele.com. And if you just search architectural elements fabrication on the internet, it should pop up.
Yeah.
So
Joe's actually a good follow on LinkedIn too, because he's always engaging with like some really cool like metal work, like structural work. Like every time I open up LinkedIn, I see Joe's like liking something that, like a cool bridge or a cool like metal art piece. My timeline just filled with it for some reason.
We welcome anything that's cool on LinkedIn. So please continue your service to that community.
Yeah, cool's good.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch you on a later episode.
All right, thanks a lot.
The Fabricator Podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association, located in Elgin, Illinois. The show is hosted by Dan Davis and the staff of FMA Communications. The podcast is produced by Gareth Slager and recorded and edited with the help of Brandon Geyer. Sales support provided by Andy Flando. Additional production support by Elizabeth Gavin, Dana Weicker, Mary Diamond, Mike Owens, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.